data science module is a short exploration into data science within the context of an existing course. The rhetoric module focused on analyzing political speeches, which was a great example of this connection between real-life data and classroom theory.
We did text analysis combining moral foundations theory with political speeches of the presidential candidates of the past election.
What the students had done before we even showed up was they had already analyzed a speech by hand of moral foundations theory. So they printed out a journal article and created their own dictionary of synonyms. We had them code that dictionary into Python and then create all the graphs and calculate the proportions.
When we went through political speeches over time, we followed Donald Trump, realizing that Democrats use more care words versus Republicans using more authority words. And there was a huge outlier. And then one of the students had an audible gasp. And we were all wondering, he's like, oh, that's when the Access Hollywood tape came out. And that was the only date that Donald Trump used a lot more care words. It seemed like it was in the blue streak of other speeches. So he was within the Democratic candidate speeches. And we finally understood why that outlier happened, and it was really interesting for us to see a student connect the dots.
Modules allow students to make their own inferences about the patterns in the data that they're studying. In linguistics, students were able to connect individual speech sounds with characteristics of the person who made those sounds.
One way to think about the way that people talk is to break it up into individual speech sounds themselves. For most types of English, there are like 44 different speech sounds. And so we can describe each of those speech sounds with binary features. We can say, this sound is plus this feature and minus this feature.
Professor for linguistics 110 had the students collect their own data. So based on, it was initially the first one was looking at vowel formants. We would just measure those and compare them to certain biological features or characteristics, like how tall are they, or what gender do they identify as, or what's their original language they spoke.
You can ask really interesting questions like, what are the most common speech sounds across all different languages in the world? And if you see, hey, this speech sound here is in every single language, well, that's kind of interesting and it deserves some sort of a scientific explanation.
Modules expose students to tools that they can use to understand and impact the world around them.
A data set called Project Implicit has prejudice measured both at the implicit and explicit level with county level markers. And what we did is we then found another data set related to health outcomes that also had county level markers. And we put those data sets together and tried to analyze the relationship between bias and health outcomes.
By analyzing both quantitative and qualitative data, students were able to understand the transformation of neighborhoods in the community.
I've always had students do a neighborhood assignment that involves some kind of field work where they go to a neighborhood and they have to make observations or collect some kind of data. And so the coding sheet asks them to pick out one block within the census tract, and then they will note things like the condition of the buildings. Is it mostly residential? Is it commercial, industrial? For not only the photos, but the other data that's collected, we should be able to tell a story about the number 18 bus route. We're even hoping that over multiple semesters we can kind of keep this going, and then our data will just grow, right? And then we can think about, well, how could we use, what could we study with this? Maybe we could study patterns of gentrification, and neighborhood change.
So it was really cool to see the students' data that they collected come alive in mapping in the Jupyter Notebook. There are so many different applications that we can use for data science, Python, R, any sort of programming language, and I think while it's cool to see it in your domain, it's really cool to see other applications as well and can really spark an interest that you didn't even know that you had.